Welcome to MeDeMAP, Mapping Media for Future Democracies. Join us on a journey across Europe. Meet specialists and researchers from various fields, unravel the democratic functions of media, and discuss its impact on the essence of democracy. MeDeMAP.
Thank you so much for organizing this. What we do with these roundtables is victimize colleagues. That's our basic principle. So we wrote this book, and then we decided that we would organize a series of roundtables throughout the world, and we trap our dear colleagues into reading the book. It's one of the better strategies to actually ensure that there's an audience of the book. So I'm extremely grateful to those people that accepted this trap and spend time, and time is precious in academia, that spend time on reading that book and coming up with some critical, flattering, destructive, whatever kind of comments. At the same time, we're not going to talk that much about the book. The book is a starting point. The book allows us to think about democracy and media, and each of these debates is localized. At the same time, there are, of course, global dimensions, and I challenge my colleagues not to mention Trump and not to, right? Just a test, see if we can do without Trump for at least half an hour. That would be so reassuring in a way, because we talk too much about him. But what I'll do is nevertheless quickly introduce the book. Jeff, at the end, will launch a series of brilliant comments, closing the session and hopefully making us go home with a good feeling. While the discussions about media and democracy these days are not necessarily always that pleasant and that easy. So allow me to very quickly show you some pictures about the book. And maybe if we go, this is a core model. And actually what the book tries to offer is a way of thinking about both democracy as a political process of conflict resolution, because that's what it basically is, societal problem solving. And we also try to offer a way of thinking about the role of media within democracy. And actually in both parts, because the book has two parts, we use this as a general framework. And what we try to argue is that democracy in itself is unstable, that it's contested, that is part of a political process. We actually use democracy to think about democracy, but we also sometimes use democracy to think against democracy, and outside forces also in ways try to pull democracy out of democracy. So there are a whole set of struggles going on, and that's very much part of our thinking, part of this book. And what you see there at the center is a reflection about what is the heart of democracy, what is the core idea of media in democracy, and that's our starting point. We argue that there's a series of conditions of possibility, enabling elements that are outside democracy, but that actually are very necessary to ensure that democracy can function and that the media can play a democratic role. And we think about struggles within democracy, contestations. Not everything is taken for granted. Not even the media's role in democracy is taken for granted. But we also think about threats, forces that try to pull democracy away from itself to create alternatives. And what we see now mostly are radical right-wing projects, authoritarian projects that actually try to redefine our societies, our political communities in moving away from democracy. And these we call threats. Behind that word, behind the choice of threats, is a very simple idea. We believe in democracy. We will defend democracy as academics. We find that a very precious project. Not everybody might agree, but it's a very normative position that we take. Right? So if we go a bit deeper, and I can assure you I'm not going to talk of each and every little detail here, but that core model gets unpacked. That's what the book does. It looks at what are these core elements, what are the political struggles, what are the conditions of possibility, and what are the threats. That's what we try to do with this book. But so one of the elements, and this is where the visuals go wrong, one of the elements are the conditions of possibility. And just to give you one example of each, what are conditions of possibility? They're outside democracy, but without them, we cannot have democracy. A simple example, stability. If we don't have societal financial stability, then democracy actually becomes contested very quickly. We've seen that throughout history. If there are core issues with how we live, the struggle to survive, then democracy very quickly gets in trouble. So we need that financial, social, political stability for democracy to work. If you look at threats to media's roles in democracy, well, there are quite a few. And maybe I should take, I'm now improvising, of course, well, maybe the colonization of the public sphere. It's a very old one. But what we see is economic agents taking more and more control of media, implementing their logics, their economic logics on media, making media into money-generating machines, which not necessarily is perfectly aligned, to use an understatement, with democracy. If you go for clicks, to put it in very simple terms, you might not support democracy. You might actually support your financial capital. And that is one of the major threats, what we see now with the big tech, with the platforms and the companies behind these platforms. Then we go into political struggles. If we look at what contestations we have, again, let me give you one example. Democracy is always about reconciling participation and representation. That's a core mechanism of democracy. We allow different actors to decide for us to some degree, but we retain some control. Representation and participation, the delegation of power and the exercise of power. There's always a balance. But how we actually define that participation, for instance, is extremely contested. To take an old example, if you look at Facebook, do you have any participation? Is there any control in how Facebook looks? None whatsoever. You get the framework, you get the platform, and you're forced to use it. There is no participation in how Facebook actually offers its services. So there's a huge fight in the media sphere in how much participation is actually enabled, what kind of participation, how deep the participation can go. And that is a political struggle. That's different actors trying to move these platforms into different directions, new platforms being created. Think about the Fediverse as an alternative to the commercial mainstream social media. So we see these struggles going on. That's the basic idea. Now, the one thing we actually don't talk about is this. We don't offer solutions. We're having fun providing a structure to think about the problems. That's our job. Solutions is part of the discussion and part of these roundtables. So I basically also challenge all you guys to solve this little gap that we left. And of course, in the next slide, we could discuss so many possible solutions, but just one core idea. It's not just about new policies. We often think, when we think about the media's role in democracy, we often think about media as in need of regulation. And they are, but that's only half of the story. We, as citizens, organized in civil society, interacting with the market, interacting with the state, we also have a responsibility, a collective responsibility to protect democracy. And there's a whole set of activities that we, also as academics, can deploy. And let me give you two examples. One, in a little corner below, you find what is called the Czech Citizen Parliament on Media and Democracy. It was actually part of the MeDeMAP project, where we mandated ordinary Czech citizens to come up with a future plan for media and democracy. It was about the empowerment of ordinary people to think through the future of media and democracy, also at the level of policy, but also at the level of practice. And what academics can do, we can facilitate these kind of dialogues. We can help ordinary people to have their voices heard. And I can actually assure you, having been responsible for organizing the citizen parliament in the Czech Republic, they're not ordinary people. We had 20 Czech citizens that were extraordinary people. And they did a wonderful job. They wrote a report that is at the same level as academics can write reports. But what we can do is give ordinary people, I hope I didn't say something wrong. It happens, it's life. So ordinary people can be extraordinary, but we as academics, we can generate context for them to speak, to have their voices heard. We can play a role there. But we can also talk about democracy. We don't do that enough. We don't discuss democracy as democracy in a sufficient way. And one of the projects that we were also working on was to translate this and actually use this book as inspiration to produce a 26-minute short film about democracy, communicating in different ways. Because as academics, we write these things. And for those, and it's an open access book, you can check if you don't believe me, it's not always easy to read. That's a dramatic moment that is perfectly timed. I'll say it again, see if it happens again. It's not a very easy book to read. And we have to, yeah, well, thank you. We have to use different modes of communication to bring these ideas across. And a book is just one of them. It's an important format because we allow ourselves to elaborate ideas, to structure ideas, but it's not the only format. And what I want to show you is another way of telling the story of democracy. It's not the full version. I thought that maybe 26 minutes was a bit much. So we also have a trailer of that film. And if it's okay to our hidden guy behind me, who I will now address, can the hidden guy, also known as the technician, please start the film? Well, that's the introduction. All yours.
Okay, so we will now move on to the, I would call it a debate, a roundtable. And I will first give the floor to Sada.
Thank you.
To start, I'll turn this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Does it work? No. Okay. It was very nice. The trailer I didn't see yet, and well, this book is a very interesting approach to democracy and media, in a way that the authors try to do a bridge between the two themes, and they show us how the themes and the issues overlap. So it's a kind of assemblage, the word you use, and I thought it was very interesting to use this word because it reminded me of a work of art, a kind of work that is always in movement, and you try to talk about this moving situations of the relation between democracy and media, and that has a core. And if that core doesn't isn't kept in any way, it changes a lot. We can suddenly stop to have democracy, and we can have a backsliding of democracy, and we can become dictatorships or authoritarianism regimes. And in that way, and you talk about that also, namely when you talk about the case in Bosnia and what Holbrooke said about tolerance and intolerance. I think we are living now a moment where tolerance and intolerance collide a lot. We have movements that some of us feel that are against democracy, that are extremists. We have parties that in a way are against fundamental rights. Nowadays, we discuss a lot the extreme right parties all over Europe that are growing. And I would like you to talk a bit about the tolerance and intolerance relation, and how the media can position themselves relating these fundamental rights threats and these extreme right movements. Should the media be completely tolerant and then be smashed? And democracy also, because themes overlap and they are completely codependent, as you know, because when there is a coup and when democracy is at stake, the media are the first to suffer. We see in every country when there is some kind of change in democracy, it's the media and the journalists that start suffering first. So how could the media react? How could the media also, like academia, could in a way defend democracy and be a kind of guidance for the people to follow and to participate and defend their democracies? Queres falar tu?
Just to reiterate the debate a bit. So Popper was writing about the paradox of tolerance, right? And it's an old idea, and it's incredibly relevant nowadays. The paradox of toleration or tolerance is that what do you do if different actors demand tolerance, but then use the tolerance to destroy the tolerant context, the tolerant society, so that we move into intolerance. And that's the paradox. And there is, of course, it's a very old debate, there is no clear solution to that. One element, I think, that intersects with that paradox, sorry, now I really go theoretical, because there is a huge difference between what is called formal procedural democracy and substantive democracy. Just to explain, and I can do a test. Can I? I can make it interactive for a second. I'll give you a dilemma. Right? We have a parliament, and the parliament decides with a full majority to deport a minority. Right? So you get the context, right? You're sitting in parliament, you make a decision, and in a perfectly parliamentarian way, that parliament decides to deport 10% of the population, who obviously only have 10% of the votes, or probably less. So their counter vote is voted away. There is a clear majority. Is that scenario, is that decision democratic? Who would say yes? It's complicated. Don't do that. It's a yes and no. But some people would say this is democratic. Who would say that? It's okay to say that. It's dreadful. Who would say that this is not democratic? So we have 2 votes and the rest is quiet? 4 votes. So what that dilemma allows us, thank you for the participatory moment and sorry for putting you on the spot. That difference is the difference between procedural democracy, like a decision is democratic because a parliament, democratically elected parliament makes the decision. And the other is a substantive democratic logics. If you take a decision like that, you violate human rights, and that goes against the logics of a democratic culture. Now, how we think about these two in our societies, it's not agreed upon. And the thing is that the intolerant forces often use procedural democracy to establish what is now called illiberal democracies. Right? To say like, oh, we'll just have elections and then we can do for 4 years whatever we want. We can deport people, we can put people into prison, it's fine as long as we have the people voting. And that is using democracy against itself, because I take a very substantive position. For me, human rights are crucial as part of democracy. But as long as we haven't decided, is it just procedural democracy or is it also substantive democracy, then we will fall into this trap on what to do with actors that say we're going to use tolerance against tolerance, we're going to use democracy against democracy. What are the solutions? Well, that's to put frontiers into the political system, that to argue that some of these infringements are not acceptable, that attacks on human rights, attacks on the rights of minorities are just not democratic. And we need to, as a society, this is not something that we can solve on our own. As a society, we need to find a position, a majority position, I would say, where we create a hegemony of respect, of acceptance of dignity, of human rights. And as long as we get stuck into this trap about it's only about procedures, it's only about exercising tolerance at the expense of everything, we are going to get stuck in this dilemma and we're going to actually harm democracy. That will be my short version.
Don't you have a constitution to provide support for those sort of dilemmas?
The Habermasian answer. The importance of the Constitution, yes.
But it can be changed too.
Then nothing makes any sense. If you don't have a constitution, it makes sense.
No, I mean the Constitution, okay, the broader answer, the legal system provides protection. We have seen that all over the world, that a legal system is, for instance, in the US, it's a way to protect authoritarian tendencies. So that I completely agree. I don't think it's sufficient, because if a majority of a population or large parts of a population don't understand democracy in this broad way, the legal system will be powerless at the end, and the Constitution will be empty. We already see that interpretations of constitutions are problematic in their own right.
Yeah, I can see that.
But that's Habermas's point, right? The idea that the Constitution will protect us, and there is a good point there, but it's not enough.
Well, I would say that the media have an important role because of the political participation, and constitutional rights can be a guarantee, but they are not completely protected, because we have seen history shows us that along the course of history, there are many dictators that took place and that took power with the right procedures, coming to power with elections and so on. And in another point of view, it's also difficult to think that procedures can be challenged because procedures are in place to be a guarantee too of democracy. And so the collective participation, as you said, the regulatory is not enough. How would you think about collective participation in societies where the people, as you say in the book, are completely distant and they don't participate, they don't vote? We have seen in consolidated democracies there's growing abstention. How would you say that we could mobilize the civil society to democracy and to media? Because we are also seeing how the media are being dislocated, to use a term that you use, to democracy in their functions. And so there's a risk to society, but how can we mobilize, and how can we mobilize against the procedures in a way? Because we are almost acting illegally, as you see now in other situations, isn't it? Yep. So I know you don't have a solution, and I'm just problematizing. I'm sorry.
No, I'll let Jeffrey answer.
Thank you very much to both of you. Okay. Thank you very much for both of you for the nice questions. Rhetorical questions, probably. Okay, I try also with an interactive thing, but we already know the answer. So who of you has an Instagram account? Instagram. Who is on Instagram?
Sadly, yes.
Oh, happily. Yes. Thank you very much. Who of you is on the Fediverse? The what? He mentioned it, the Fediverse. For example, do you have a Mastodon account? Okay, 4, 5, perfect. So, no, but it's also the answer. So if you, no, it's because you were talking about, Habermas would say, revitalizing public sphere, revitalizing democracy. How do we do that? And one notion is also we have to see, like the trailer, and the movie is called Argon. It's Old Greek for competition. We have to compete more. I think democracy got a little bit lazy in the last decades. We would say, okay, the procedures will save us. Then the platforms came. They will save us. They make us lazy, like Instagram. It's not very participative. Nico said in the introduction, Facebook, you get what you see and then it's fine. And you don't have to be active. Like the Fediverse, that's an alternative to the traditional social media, which are not social. They are economic media. They sell something, the economic thing. The Fediverse, we have to do on ourselves, like science. We have to develop ideas and something like that. And that's the thing you said. What we have to do, we have to develop. And we have to compete. Not to say we lost, no. Okay, one battle, for example, but not the war. And we have to go on. And then to develop our own networks and other things. And that's always the same in the centuries. So like transportation, the means of transportation. The car culture has won. Germany, where I'm from, also in Portugal. And we have to develop new ways of transport. And also we have to develop new ways of democracy. And the citizen parliament is just one idea we developed in our project, and it helps in certain contexts, but it will be not the only solution. So that's why we're also doing these book talks around the local communities to think about what are your experiences, what we can learn from you in Brazil, in Portugal, Pakistan, wherever. It was not an answer, but my comment.
So, good morning, everyone, and congratulations on the book that was very inspiring. And going back to AIP model, again, that was very inspirational and relevant for me a bit more than 10 years ago when I was doing my PhD, because the model placed boundaries that by then no one talked about it. I could have the feeling within my field of research, but everything was about how good internet is and how it will save us. Okay, so so thank you, and I think that maybe a challenge could be to transform this model to adapt it also not only for our life online, but also for our democratic life. So to make an update of the model considering that. And why? Because I'm feeling radical and normative. So yes, at the same time, and so for me in the last 2-3 years, I'm feeling normative, which I wasn't before, in relation to these questions, and also thinking at first about one issue that I don't think it's too much discussed in the book, because in the book I felt that in relation to participation or absence a participation, it was more on the way of participate, not to participate, in a way a bit binary. And but I'm always thinking on this idea, and especially in the last years, of non-participation, and also because is all types of participations, are they good? So when we consider non-participation, I think it's just a small part of the question, because, and especially nowadays, I think we should be more normative and think about what is good participation and what is bad participation. For instance, when some years ago, when I was discussing this issue with my students, usually I used to give examples such as, so if we see a racist protest, is this the type of participation that we want? But nowadays, or sometimes I also gave other examples, for instance, a Nazi participation. But nowadays, we don't need to go to history, because we have our daily examples. So I think this issue of good and bad participation could be something really interesting. And another thing, and if we go to the title, Democracy and Media in Europe, which is absolutely fine, of course, but what I felt, what I felt was that this discussion, when we do that discussion in Europe, in US, we keep our ground there, and our ground is not only there anymore. It was never, but nowadays is not. So I think that it could be also interesting for us. And in a way, you tackle that with this concept of denizenship, which I didn't knew, and I find it very interesting and complex. But I think it would be really also important that us European scholars and Northern American scholars, I think we really need to bring other geographies when we are talking about our context, because it's not only our context. So, and I don't know if I don't have really any questions. I don't know if I stop here for now or if I just finish. What do you prefer?
You can have a vote.
No. Maybe we jump to Zay and then we do another round. Yeah, I think it's preferable. And please feel free to also intervene.
I have my hands free because I think with my hands too.
So you can have.
Okay. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Jeffrey, because this book is striking. I'm sincere, it's striking, and I have the bad habit to read the books, so and all the things. But I have the bad habit to stop in some parts of the books, as by training, Okay. So first, when I read the book and I have a presentation, I used to think like the French. I have to attack you, but it's not the case. It's not the case. I only have some challenge and not get lost, because it's very striking, this book. But the first thing when I read the book, that I tried to summarize it, it's to take a sentence that resumed the book. And I think that the sentence that resumed the book, it's that you try to demonstrate that democracy is the hypostasiations of Europe. So there is no Europe without the notion of democracy. So, and I think that if Europe can be thought as a political sphere and as a political space, the concept is the democracy. So, and that was where I stopped. Page 20, the first slide you show, and about the conditions of possibility, the Bedingungen der Möglichkeit, and that's what I stopped. I stopped there because, and I will immediately I came back to the critique of pure reason that you quote, and the definition of the conditions of possibility. Conditions of possibility, Kant talks, is the condition of possibility of experience, which is talking about, you quote, in general, are the same time conditions of the possibility of the objects of experience. So if we change the approach, we can read Kant now by you saying that the conditions of possibility of politics in general are the same time the conditions of possibility of the objects of politics itself. So, and if we go to the doctrine of transcendental elements and the notion of schemata, I think that you were you said that it's not easy to read. It's not easy to read because it left too much behind. If we went to the notion of that you are trying to situate the media, it's what Kant, by using the notion of schema, calls Eintrittes. Between I will read between the concepts of pure understanding, or so to say, between the concepts of democracy and the institutions, the limitation of intuitions. Here we can translate it as institutions. There must be a third thing, Eintrittes. There must be the third thing, and that third thing is media. And I think that you touched the point, and I think that this is concealed by the notion of democracy in media in Europe. I think it's a book on media theory. It's a book, and a book on media theory, and that's my provocation to you, that you sometime or on purpose forgot all the Marxist tradition, all the Frankfurt School tradition, all the critiques that were made. And when I was reading, immediately I went to the bibliography, and I thought that was missing Hans Magnus Enzensberger from the 70s, Baukasten, the Constituents of a Theory of Media. And I think that there are parallels between that text and your texts. Even in the charts, that you are comparing. And my challenging to you is that, do you think that we should rethink now or rethink again the notion of emancipatory media and repressive media, but using this, the Kant, or going back to Kant, and then we can keep talking about that. The notion of the Schwebendes the hovering, the floating image that only media can do. And I think that if I don't know if it is because I'm not into too much empirical studies. I don't know if it is constitutions or if it is whatever. But I think that when you focus on the materiality of media, I think that you are posing a very strong question, hard question, not soft one. That means that is there such a thing as an emancipatory use of media, in spite of the fact that there are repressive use of media? And would you agree with a sentence? I have to read it because that Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci quotes in the Notes of Prisons. I think it's for the 28. He says that we should think. One must think or combine the pessimism of the intellect with the optimism of the will. I think that these books, it's you trying balancing. So that be. You are too less pessimist than I thought you will be in terms of intellectual terms, but you are very positive in terms of the willing terms, in terms of the will of the people. And the other one is, would you think that when you talk about people, could be translated as well into the notion of mass, for instance?
Where to start? No, it's okay. Otherwise, I go stereo. I need to get closer, right? Well, thank you both for the provocations and the challenges and all the nice words. And that's, of course, when you put a few philosophers at the table, then somehow Kant has to come up. Yes, we did it to ourselves. I'm aware of that. And I think your paraphrasation of the dynamics of politics and the object of politics is a very good reading, and I do think that matters. The notion of the conditions of possibility actually got dear to me, but not just in the Kantian interpretation, but also in later interpretations that come through Foucault and that come through Deleuze, that make it a bit more fluffy, where I'm more comfortable. And that's one of the first answers. I would always be careful with getting myself locked into the dialectics. And there's a long philosophical tradition of people that have fallen into that trap. And I think much more in dimensions, but I also think, well, Deleuze's notion of the fold, le pli, right? The idea that they're not straightforward dimensions, but that they're like these folds into these dimensions, holes or different dimensions that cross-sect. And I think that's very much my way of thinking. So with all sympathy for people like Enzensberger, who I, in the older version at least, really liked, but it's too easy. It's too dichotomous. It doesn't take the complexities of participation into consideration. It doesn't take the diversity of constructions into consideration, right? If you say like, well, is it the people? Is it the political community as we talk it? Is it the mass? Well, these are political constructions, and they're actually objects, very much going back to what you said, they're objects of politics. They are unstable in their own right because they're constantly contested, right? And just to take one example, otherwise we go like a bit too high. But to take a particular example, the idea of participation, right? What I've been arguing is that in some cases, what is labeled participation is just not participation, because it's a form of manipulation, it's a form of exploitation, which is, of course, inspired by a Marxist critique as well. But what I'm trying to argue is like, let's not sort of fall into the trap of a simple ladder with a few steps and then say like, okay, this is the good part and this is the bad part. I think we need to look at that complexity, which also means that we're combining practices and analysis of practices with discourses and analysis of discourses, the way we think, the way we act. And that creates these multi-layered realities where dialectics, in my humble opinion, fails. So that's a starting point. We need to look at time, for instance, how participation is more maximalist at one moment and more minimalist at another, how in different contexts participation takes different shades and different versions, and that complexity we can't just rule out. That's one key point. So it's an argument for complexity, I would say, moving beyond the dichotomies of dialectics. But, and then Jeffrey can kick in, so I'll warn you already. The Marxist tradition plays a significant role through the emphasis on materiality. But of course we use new materialism and not old materialism, but new materialism is still connected to the Marxist tradition. It still speaks about the structures of society, class, for one, but it tries to argue that structures are just one part of materiality, not the only and exclusive part of materiality. So what we try to do with this discursive material approach is to reconcile, say, a more political economy, a more Marxist emphasis on difference, but difference in a more economic way. We try to combine that with all the different other layers of materiality, which also goes into enactments, goes to the agency of the material. All these ideas come in. But we also try to combine that and cross-fertilize that with a more discursive component where we argue, well, materiality is one thing, how we think materiality is another, and we need to look at both. And again, that's a complexity, and it's not a dichotomy or a simple dimension. It's an endless rhizomatic network of interactions that we look at. Yeah, sorry for going high theory for a second. It's his fault. But what I'm trying to argue is that it's a very thin book, and so there are lots of connections, and I think that is absolutely right. But we also wanted to have a degree of modesty as two white guys, not just sort of going to say like we're going to understand the world in one book. And so in Europe there plays an important role in maybe bringing in the modesty that we think we should be bringing in, not to speak for the world, because Europeans have done that too often. What we do think is that we need to create these dialogues with other contexts, with other communities, with other parts of the world, for them to come up with their variations of this, or their critiques of this, or their alterations of this. And so in Europe is partially, yes, it's partially embedded in a European tradition of enlightenment, yes. I mean, that's where we come from. And I will take that as a compliment and as a critique at the same time. Okay, I'll take it as a compliment and not as a critique, if you insist. But I mean, that's where we are embedded, that's where we speak from. That is our cultural heritage. And we can't just deny that. But at the same time, we should have that modesty as being also the instigators of huge colonial disasters. We should be careful not to speak for other communities, and we should allow these other communities to develop their frameworks, preferably in dialogue with us, because I enjoy these dialogues, because the difference they bring to the table is also the difference we bring to the table. And so we try to find the balance. But yes, it is grounded in the Enlightenment. Our normative position is a position connected to the Enlightenment, and that is one thing we should protect as academics. That's the short answer. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Nico, for this 3 minutes warning, which was 13 minutes. Yes. Thank you, both of you. Now I try to react to both of you because I think they're related in some way. First, I would say it's a very thin book, but it's like an iceberg. It talks about 5% and 95% not, but it's related to that. And one of the, when we started writing the book, was like, okay, we want to use notions which are not that connected to a certain period of time. We wanted to find notions which are much more stable, like democracy, like media, which endure time, which are, and then normativity kicks in, because what you at one point find good could be 10 years later not that good. Example would be Enzensberg, and like very much when you related to that. And it's one of the starting in the 70s, thinking about community media and saying, we are the media. And there are several authors who talk about that. And then 40 years later, Musk is tweeting, or Trump is meeting, now we are the media. Then you see, oh, from a normative point of view, something has gone wrong. You had the example, or you had the example, demonstrating for, I don't know, right-wing views. Is this democracy or not? And that's normativity helps, of course. But normativity itself is not stable. That's why in this book we said, okay, how we understand democracy in our local or national, transnational context in Europe is funded on specific human rights. This was our starting point. Okay. And the other thing is, of course, and also being a German, I thought, oh, we have to incorporate it Frankfurt School or something like that, and think about that. And Habermas, we had it, but not that much. We had it a little bit in the idea of the political economy. Nico was referring at the beginning, what are the conditions of resources, and what is the share of commercialization? Is it a social media or is it a commercial media? What is the idea of the Fediverse? And the idea of the Fediverse is not to maximize profit, it's the idea to maximize participation in community. And so we have it thought about that, but it's not that explicit. It could be the third book or the fourth book. Because the idea of the second book is a little bit different. We want to talk about participation much more. And knowledge, and something we also, this one thing, I think, we have it indirectly. If we talk about humans, it's also the meaning, how the people make sense of something. And this is related, of course, to materiality. I will try to talk about it later on.
Do you think that, for instance, the concept of participation could be an actualization of the concept of mobilization? That was the idea of the new enlightenment of the Frankfurt School, and in a sense that mobilization can only be stopped because there could be a good mobilization by regulation, for instance. That participation or the mobilization of the masses, the public, the people, should be or can be only be limited by regulation or.
That's a tricky one, because I tend to see, just to clarify, I tend to see participation as a form of decentralization of power. And that's the starting point. There are basically two definitions of participation. One, participation as to take part, and there, from that perspective, the good news, you're all participating. Because you're here, you're sitting with us, you're taking part in a process. But that's not how I define participation. I define it as to co-decide, to share power. Are you sharing power? Hardly. From that perspective, you're not participating, except for the 2 or 3 people that actually had the audacity of leaving because they could vote with their feet. And that is actually a gentle form of participation. It's to retake control over the room. So yeah, I mean, the ones that left, they were in a way participating. But that's how we define participation, as a decentralization of power inequalities. And in that sense, mobilization plays a role in that, because for people to become, well, empowered, to use that term, of course they need to be mobilized. And of course that mobilization needs to be structured. Because one funny thing about participation, if you open the door and say you can all participate, nothing will happen. If there's no structure, if there's no context in which that mobilization or that participation is embedded in, there will be no participation. There will be absolutely nothing. A few people might get in, but that is not, and that's what the citizen parliaments actually show. You create the context, you create training, you create support, and people can do miraculous things, and they can retake power. But only, and that is a form of mobilization, yes, and that is a form of regulation and structure, yes, but it is also about stepping back. It's also about then allowing those who are in these disprivileged positions that become more privileged, again, another definition of participation, is allowing them to play that role by not intervening, by not imposing. And there, as a footnote, non-participation is crucial. I will always defend the right not to participate. I think that's a human right. The right to stay out, the right not to be dragged into a process. And that is absolutely vital, because if we start enforcing participation, it loses its participatory dimension. It's the best way to destroy it. It's to enforce it. It needs to be on a voluntary basis. It needs to be the will of the people that not only speaks, but only also motivates to enter, to engage. And that for me is, yes, mobilization is connected, but in a different way, I think.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I would here just bring another idea to the discussion, which is, and we talked previously about tolerance, and I would also go to the flip side of the coin, the idea of controversy. That in a way, and also because in democracy we always claim the notion that we accept everyone and everyone ideas and ways of acting, but in a way and in practical terms, it looks also that throughout the decades and centuries, we kept saying that, but in practical terms, maybe we didn't do that, and because in a way, in democracies, we look more at tolerance and, I wanted to say at consensus than to controversy. It looks to me, for instance, in some of the projects that I've been reading and working with, that the notion of controversy is far more important than we give it. And so in a way, I also felt that this was not, that in a way this was absent. But when we talk about apathy, actually, when we were looking at apathy as something that maybe it was not participation, or it was a tiny, small micro participation, maybe in that process of leaving that in a way inside but outside, I also think that by doing that and by avoiding controversial issues and dialogue through having different ideas, we left in the space, in the interior space of democracy, not outside, but in the interior space of democracy, we let the seeds growing about what we are now complaining. And it's just some thoughts.
No. Maybe, Jeffrey, I will give you the 3-minute warning again, because the one thing I want to emphasize is that for the book, the idea of conflict, maybe we sort of use conflict more than controversy, but conflict is vital. And I think if there's one point we want to make is it's democratically important to disagree.
Yeah.
Because what democracy does is offer us a model to deal with disagreement.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about creating consensus. Sure, I mean, the logics of the decision, right? A parliament has a vote, it takes a decision. That is important. You need to have moments of closure, otherwise regulation or any kind of structure becomes impossible. So you need to have mechanisms to create consensus or create the illusion of consensus, depending on what version you are looking at. So that is important, but it's an illusion to think we agree. What democracy does is allow us to deal with disagreement and to find ways of handling that. And what we forgot, and that's your point, and that is so important, what we forgot is to celebrate disagreement. We need to, instead of saying, and this is one of my real annoyances, right, in political debates, somebody loses and then they go, this is so undemocratic. And it's like, no, it's not. It's democratic. It's the ultimate moment of democracy. You had a struggle and you lost, but you did it within the context of a democratic system that pacified that struggle, that prevented violence from being used. And that is so, so important. So we should be very, very careful when we start complaining about democracy not functioning because there's conflict. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's because we have conflict and we can handle it that we're democratic. Right? It's the pacification of violent conflict. In the book, there's a quote of Canetti. Right? Democracy is a suspension of violence. And that's the crucial idea of democracy. That's why we're not banging in each other's heads, because we have a mechanism to prevent that. But it is about mediating these different conflicts. And if we sort of forget and we start creating the Habermasian illusion of total consensus, we lose out on half of what democracy is. At the same time, we should not remain blind for the conflicts that try to push democracy out of democracy. There is conflict within democracy, but there is also conflict against democracy, and that's where we need to be careful. That's where the threats start. And we need to navigate that very thin line between let's celebrate this conflict because we disagree and this is good, versus what you're saying is harmful. What you're saying is attacking the dignity of a part of our population, part of our political community. What you're trying to do is to harm people. And these are limits, because that's reintroducing violence.
Yes.
That's exactly the point. So if you start using, even if it's symbolic violence.
Yes, that's what I was saying, because it's not only physical, but
Exactly.
Yes.
So once you start using violence and reintroduce it in a particular society, you start harming democracy and start threatening it. And that's where we need to look at borders and frontiers between what is good conflict and problematic conflict in a democratic context. That was the 3-minute warning.
I want to say something which also relates to your feedback.
Jose.
Yeah, this is striking, because you also talked about the mediating role. The third one, the dritte. And he was saying, who is mediating the controversy? And this is one thing in our book. We confine ourselves, because of the context of the project, to news media. We like movies. That's why the title of my remarks is a movie, or the movie of the book by H.G. Wells, The Shape of Things to Come. The movie is from the 30s and tells the story about a society who is in an endless war. We are in an endless war, somewhat, and then out of the anarchy, they're building a rational new society, and then they're heading to space, to Mars and beyond, like Elon Musk. There you see how is it related to each other, huh? Ideas, ideology. So we are all exhausted. So I have only 2 slides, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Please to the next one. So 2 things. This was our starting point of the book, the discursive material assemblage. And before the digital age, and we are now in the post-digital age, that means we are so used to it. We are oversaturated with it. And before the digital era, the things, the processes, I mean with that, the social things, seem to be clear. There were ideas and objects, and the relations were very sparse. We want to show in our book that it's not that easy to understand, that the things are interrelated, that's the assemblage. The ideas are very interrelated with the material things. One of the last examples is that on the right. You all know, 2 weeks ago, how the bullet was encoded with gamer language. And then it's not that easy to decode. The movie Bella Ciao, and so the song, not the movie, sorry, and so on. If you read this, you are gay, laughing out loud, and so on and so on. And so as a consequence, and you were talking about chatbots, I will return to that, the things, or both worlds, are more influenced by each other. From a normative point of view, being a scholar, I would say they're more polluted by each other, democracy and media. And it's like we are like addicts now. We are overusing it without having yet social norms and culture to master these new powers. And that was your question. So could we think of collective solutions? And it's not clear yet what are the good practices. And this would be the first thing to do for sure, to sober up before moving up to new things further. And one thing, what is connected to that, and I think you were saying that kind of indirectly, is nowadays it's not about creating knowledge, it's more like observing, commenting to each other. We are seeing something and then you comment to it. So it's like a spectacle of the audiences. And it's like we're producing comments and comments and comments, and then it's not related to expertise, to prominence, attention. Like Nico said in the discussion, that participation means expertise. And the expertise, of course, could be very individualist. And we have to acknowledge expertise. It comes out of different ways, not only because you are educated, something you, and so on and so on. And this is one thing, and the other thing is creating communities. And it's the same here. The typical thing on the internet right now, if you like a politician or dislike some politician, you want to see how the other people are reacting. Or they're also liking or disliking it. And that, at the end, it means that in a digital society, it's not longer enough to practice or to enjoy the things. It's you want to prove that the others are also enjoying it or disliking it. And this is some version of the hyper-connected one. And then, please to the last slide, yes. And now we have a totally, not totally, but it's the shape of things to come, changed access to the world. And how do we access the world? Now we are at the end of the social media era. Now we are coming to the AI, chatbot, intelligent things. At the end of the internet. We are not searching on the internet. We don't find anything on the internet right now. Some AI chatbot tells us something, and then we say, okay, fine. And how we connect with the world via digital interfaces changes how we interact with our fellow humans and also with democracy. And the time taken up by technology is missing elsewhere. Of course, AI helps us. So we don't need that much time. But with what is that then being spent? And And then the other thing, and we are only touching it on the book, on the surface, good democracy, which creates connection, needs near open platforms. This is something the title of our, or it used to be our title, new relationships, new platforms. And this is one example would be the Fediverse, the many branches of the Fediverse. Different platforms, for example, Mastodon, which are not based on algorithms. There's something old one, probably some of you use it. I use it, RSS feeds. They're not based on algorithms, something from the 90s. Still working out there and very good from my point of view. And this is one thing, because the one idea of it, we touched on it, is about the sense of community. And all the digital technologies are kind of personalization machines, individualization machines. The cars, television, smartphone. It's not bringing the people together. It's like individualize. And that we know they're being on Netflix or blah, 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 on social media. We know the other feels the same, but we not connect in the sense of hyperconnection. And I liked very much what you said. Also, hyperconnection means also a way of reducing complexity. So AI is also very helpful in reducing complexity. It's also kind of a new, it's not a mediator, it's an intermediary, we would say in media theory. Intermediate, it mediates between something different and also acts, it's also kind of a dialectic. And yeah. And I hope we are going to, not to a lonely future on the Mars, to a very near future with love and empathy, bring some positive things. And that brings me to my last remark. And I think two of them just went outside. It's only you being here. To my empathy to the Portuguese team. And we have to appreciate it. And Oh, sorry. And you also, yeah, there are different Portuguese teams, you know. But I looked at the other two, sorry. Yeah. No, it's very grateful because, yeah, sorry. Thank you, because for the others, they are not only a one country team. It's not like the other ones from Czech Republic and so on, because also they are our communication and media team. And this is so important for us. And that's everything I can say. They are very important to us. Thank you very much for all your work.